There's an array of choices, and they go, I'm loyal to this brand. We don't have to compete on price. We're competing on something else. To help us understand this concept of branding, going from kind of good brand to a great brand, please welcome to the stage Adam Pope.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi everyone and good afternoon. Thank you to the Grow Up for having me here. I feel very fortunate to be on the stage after a number of great panelists and speakers. What I want to talk to you about today, a great intro, is about retail branding, and I'm going to talk a lot about Prairie Records, which is a retail brand that we've come out with. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer with Westleaf. And what I'm going to get through in this presentation is really talking about how we thought about building the brand and then how we bring it to life. And what I'm hoping to inspire here is a bit of thought into how we can bring branding, even in the restricted environment that we have under the regulations, a meaningful brand, and start building that as that is so important as we grow this industry. So Westleaf is a Canadian cannabis company. We're based in Calgary. We're a public company on the Venture Exchange, and we're really focused on innovative cannabis, retail experiences, as well as creating engaging products and brands. So we're on the cusp of becoming a licensed producer with an extraction facility in Calgary. But what I'm here to talk to you today about is Prairie Records. And what it is our cannabis stop, our retail concept that really celebrates cannabis and music through a really immersive in-store experience. And so when we first thought about what we're going to do for a retail brand, it was an interesting exercise that we went through. And first off, looking at the industry's challenges as we saw it through the landscape of being a retailer, and then down the road of actually also becoming a licensed producer. And so the 5 kind of key industry challenges that we went off of was, 1, how are we going to compete when we know that pricing is going to be higher than the black market? How are we going to encourage consumers to come to our stores? Then on the distribution side, there's varying levels and frameworks in place. In Saskatchewan, it's a totally private market. In Ontario, they're lotterying out retail licenses. And there's a combination between public and private enterprise. And so how are we going to continue to compete in that environment where we may not also have choice in all the products that we're bringing in? We're really just bringing in what we can stock on the shelves at this point. And then you have those marketing challenges of lack of endorsements, marketing campaigns that have mass awareness, and then the product branding itself. On the packaging, you see it's very limited in terms of the information that you would want to have on it. It's really hard to grow a brand with packaging that has a very small and benign brand element and filled with warning labels. And then finally, thinking about consumer knowledge, which is very limited right now, how are you going to educate them and bring new consumers into the category and encourage them to come to your store? So those are 5 things that we thought about as we went through, looking at the industry and thinking about our retail concept. And then we dove into some research. And there's a couple cultural and consumer tensions that I like to speak about is, first off, people are drawn to places and spaces and groups that offer the opportunity, inspiration, and new knowledge, especially in the realms of relaxation and personal betterment. And that fits really well with cannabis in a very common use. And so, while there's a lot of, opportunities for that, it's a very kind of disparate landscape when it comes to, the overall experience in cannabis retail and cannabis in general. And then when you think about the consumer tensions, and what I mean by that is there's a ton of choice right now, but a whole lot of misinformation or lack of information. And what that can do is you can breed these decisions at the purchasing point that is really based on routine and convenience, and is typically further just based on the sales associate's recommendation. And so when you have purchasing decisions that follow this line of thinking, what it becomes is a much more functional relationship, and you're not actually building a community, and you're not actually helping grow the industry. And dare I say, the stigma is not being overcome as you don't have a lot of differentiation and you're not creating that welcoming environment. And consumers, we know today, are really drawn to modern, experiences, meaningful experiences, a way of measuring quality of life. Yes, it's, there's still that drive to have the nicest car, the nicest watch, but more and more, and especially the millennial consumer, they're really looking to have experiences that maximize exactly what they're doing. And yes, so they can share it on Instagram and social media. And so when we think about building our brand and thought about building our brand here, we really built it on the ethos of encouraging discovery and wanting to offer cannabis consumers new opportunities to explore themselves, their communities, and creativity. And so what we've done with Prairie Records is brought that in the lens of a record shop. And a historical fact is also very true that music and cannabis have been best friends for a really long period of time. Just as it was, keys in the 1960s and 70s, it's still very much alive today. And artists that span across music and acting and artistic, painting and all that kind of sort of stuff, cannabis is really used as a creative engine or as a way to preserve their creativity as opposed to using other substances. And that soulful relationship between cannabis and music has really allowed that ritualistic practices to find their way into that creative process. And finally, when we actually looked into it and did the research, that there's actually scientific evidence that shows that cannabis can actually open your mind up to enjoy creative experiences or allow you to actually be more creative. And this includes everything, including enjoying music as well as art. And so all that in mind, we thought about what are the two things that we want to hone in on and how are we going to compete? And two things were a ritual and a community. And so what we aspired to do is create a ritual as iconic as the lime in the Corona bottle and create a community that, the BC cannabis, and California, cannabis providers or culture has grown, but also, how can we be part of the community that we're operating in, but then also be part of another community that can help amplify our message, as well as help grow this idea of cannabis being a really great community builder. And so what Prairie Records does, it really encourages curiosity and really unearth an inspiration and nurture creativity that advocates for discovery. And so this whole idea of reaching new heights is supposed to be inspirational. And again, I talk a lot about, and I'm going to speak a lot about inspiration, discovery, creativity. These are all things that can help break through that surface level sort of functional relationship that consumers actually have with their retail store and the brands of cannabis that they're actually buying. And so that's born as Prairie Records, the cannabis shop. And so what we're trying to do, and what we're really proud of at Westleaf and Prairie Records, is we really feel like we're redefining the cannabis purchasing experience. And I'm going to take you through how we actually accomplish that and the thought put behind it. First, I want to tell a bit of a story. So we came up with this concept about 1.5 years ago, and about 2 days later, we had an opportunity to pitch a landlord and a potential partner on a flagship location in Banff, Alberta. So, basically hot off the press, we told the story, talked about how we were doing something very different, the whole merchandising strategy, the whole design layout, and basically just very simple renders as you see here. They fell in love with it. They'd been pitched by about 4 or 5 other different companies, all with the same sort of type of philosophy, nothing really different. And right then and there, we had our flagship location for the Prairie Records brand, but it also was the validation that we needed and got to say that this is something truly different. For somebody who had been inspired, who had seen a lot in the industry, someone who had been pitched a whole bunch of different concepts, and chose ours, a little engine that could, a small company at that time, based out of Calgary, it really gave us the confidence that this is what we were going to triple, double, and quadruple down on. This guiding narrative then became our ethos of who and what we are. And so I'm going to read it verbatim for you and pull it apart a little bit. So do you hear that? We hear it too. A new sound taking the world by storm. A new melody changing the way we live. And a completely original composition, alter our very perception. Flip through the stacks, discover something different, and find yourself getting lost in the music. And so this builds off of everything that we do at Prairie Records. And when you pull it apart, so a new sound taking the world by storm. At that point, it was really talking about cannabis becoming legal, something brand new to consumers and brand new to Canada. A new melody changing the way we live and altering our very perception. So what this talks about is how do you include cannabis into your daily life? How do you include cannabis into your lifestyle that you might not thought of been for? How do you create something that is different, that encourages people who may not have ever used cannabis before to come into your store? And discover something different. And that's what we really want to be, is something truly different in the cannabis retail landscape. And in just enjoying it and being part of an actual community. So how it all comes to life. So what we do at Prairie Records is basically, it's a really welcoming and interesting experience that's all based on a record shop. So when you come into our store, and I'll flip through a couple pictures here, it truly does look like a record shop. I had a great conversation outside, and with somebody, and they asked, what makes you so different? And the first thing that you'll notice that's different about us is walking through the store, it really does look like a record shop. It's a completely different sort of merchandising mechanic. It's a different way of thinking about it, but it all comes back to how do we address the industry challenges that we see in this market. So a couple other things when you think about product placement, all the product has to be under lock and key. That is not a normal consumer or retail environment or purchasing experience. And so how do you bring more information? How do you bring effectively the packaging into the consumer's hands so they can touch and feel it? How can you create an environment that encourages consumers to stay in there longer and be comfortable? There's nothing more nostalgic than going into a record shop or a music shop and making that comfortable, more normalized consumer and shopping experience allows for a better interaction and will also allow for more loyalty when it comes to when they're choosing their store. So a couple other key elements that we thought about is in this limited world of promotions and advertising, what are some things that we can do in store to really promote our products when we end up making them, or some of the great products that are available that just don't have the ability to market and make awareness campaigns or awareness proposals, to impact customers. So that's where you see our top hits wall right there, which is in every store. Those are our featured products for the month. So the whole design and concept is not just to look cool and create something that's interesting and different, but it has a merchandising strategy, it has a marketing and branding strategy, not just for the store, but also for the products that we have in it. So I want to dive deeper into the record story. So each record cover represents a different strain of cannabis. So as you would go into a record shop, you would find records, right? Instead of finding your next favorite brand or band or artist, what you're going to find is your next favorite brand or strain of cannabis. And what we do with this is we actually provide all the information that you would want to have normally on packaging. So, an expression of the actual brand, who made it, the CBD and THC components, but then also a write-up on the back. So instead of a track list, what you're going to find is content created by that actual supplier to actually demonstrate exactly what they want to convey with this specific product. You'll also see, the different formats, terpenes, moods, as well as a recommendation on music that pairs really nicely with that product. And so what that does is it introduces a multi-sensory experience within that cannabis really represents. And you can see on the left-hand side here, the impact that it would have, with the packaging in front of it. So, marked up in yellow and the white warning signs with a very small brand element and that red stop sign. But you can see the full expression and how it comes to life in our store. And so the point of this is, one, to inspire education, but it's also that really interesting idea that comes out that consumers can flip through, look through it, and really have that community building type of experience as they're looking through it with their friends. And so talking about that in-store experience, what that record cover concept allows us to do as well is have a much more natural, sales associate or connoisseur, or whatever you want to call it, interaction with the actual customer. And what we found and had the feedback on is our sales associates are incredibly knowledgeable, but they didn't feel like they were, consumers don't feel like they're getting sold something. They don't feel like they're getting pressured to just buy the next thing so we can get to the next person in line. It's really about a really high quality experience. And when they're more comfortable and you have something that you can talk with them about and really understand what is actually they're looking for. When I brought up the industry challenge around, consumer education, getting them comfortable to be talking about what and getting at the root of really what they're trying to, use the cannabis for, this provides a great opportunity to do that. And then within that, the merchandising and, the look and feel of the store is more welcoming, and again, it just encourages a lot more exploration within the store to find the right product for them. You can't really talk about retail without talking about locations, and this has another impact on our marketing and branding. And so while, the traditional kind of retail, you're always looking for those core tenants, high, foot traffic, great parking, all those things. And obviously those things are in consideration, but here are 3 locations that we have. Some are open and some are not. But thinking about, where can I get the most eyes? Where can this store act as a billboard for our brand? So an international tourist destination like Banff is a great example of that. On Broadway Avenue in Saskatoon, it's got a high traffic, high foot traffic score, But it also is, one of 7, retail licenses in that city right now. But it's also, backed by restaurants, bars, a spin studio, and a whole bunch of complementary lifestyle type of businesses that really kind of help, again, normalize and bring, this kind of cannabis retail into a normal or an added value to the overall community. And then finally, the Palace Theater, right downtown, right in line with our brand of being, a music-based kind of theme. But it is, again, very high traffic, high foot traffic, and all those things that you look for in a high-quality retail location. So it's not just about finding, where can we put something beside a Walmart or a Tim Hortons. It's about thinking about how can you use your locations as an actual marketing tactic. So what we're about at Prairie Records is building a community, establishing that knowledge. And, supporting local is hugely important. If you want to build a community, you have to support local. And so how we do that is, obviously where we can, have products in our stores, buy local, producers and merchants. But it's also, can you use a local photographer? We have local bands show up at every single one of our store openings and are part of local and community events. And that all can help then provide some thoughtful messaging, add some education as well, and really give yourself, an opportunity to become a pillar of that community and then be an influencer within that community and look to as a beacon or a very positive impact. So we look at what we're seeing and how we're sharing it, and that all impacts. So, this is, I think, the stereotypical of what we're used to seeing with cannabis. Sort of that Cheech and Chong, White Castle, not overly, value add, especially when you think about that new consumer. And we have to remember that really it's only about 20-25% of age Canadians are consuming cannabis right now. And so you have a huge amount of Canadians that you need to bring into the category to help this industry grow. And so by providing, more value add content, like the examples here, we feel like we're better positioned to actually build that community, provide the value, and help grow the industry. And so you kind of get a sense of, by following us on Instagram, here are a couple shots about how we think about and talk about, product knowledge with terpenes, showcasing the actual product in a very beautiful way, talking about the music industry as well, and then always celebrating whenever we're part of community events, or showcasing different community events, whether that's on our social or right within our store with our community boards. And a big thing to do, obviously in the context of where we're at as an industry, is you have to think about how you're telling the story. And so there's kind of 3 different things that you need to think about. You obviously need to tell the corporate storytelling side of things. So announcing the big news, the financings, those types of things, but ensuring that you actually have a voice there to show and talk about how you're different and you have credibility. Education is paramount, as we talked about, and as I talked about previously, but finding ways to actually insert yourself in, providing education and not just being about your brand. And then telling that story about retail, and I've been very active about that, we've been very active about that, is talking about a really different concept and hopefully encouraging more people and more groups to think about retail different than just putting a flag and saying weed sold here, and creating more of an experience. And then that thought leadership piece all kind of comes into it. So telling your story. So I've been also very active in telling the story about what we're doing or our thought process, encouraging more people to share their thoughts. We're doing things really well and encouraging that discussion that I think is so important, and sharing. And it's not about, are you the best or are you the worst? Rising tides raise all ships is a great, cliche, but in this case it's very true. So I'm hoping what you kind of came out of this with, is the idea that, fostering community and encouraging that sense of discovery is so incredibly important. Creating a ritual, in our case, it's about records and music, but there's so many others, great things that you can tie into that will be familiar for other consumers or for other groups that will help tell your story. And then it's all about telling the story in the right way, in a way that is consumable and is value add to the end consumer. And that's the way that you're actually going to be able to help grow your overall brand. So thanks so much for your time.